Roping in ASEAN. The US is working hard to turn the umbrella group of nations under ASEAN against China. It instigates ASEAN members to dispute China's sovereignty over the SCS, aiming to have the whole ASEAN united against China. This would serve US national interest well in its rivalry with China. Most ASEAN members can see through this. They choose not to take side. They look upon the US as a troublemaker, the latest of those Western imperialists who had colonized them before. They know the US would use them as pawns to move against China in Asia-Pacific geopolitics. When rivalry turns to war, their people would become cannon fodder for the US.
For the first time, more people in Southeast Asia favor an alignment with China over the United States. That's according to a new report on the state of the region by Singapore think tank ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. China saw a notable jump in favor among this year's respondents, climbing up to secure a slim majority over the US. Should Southeast Asia be forced to choose between these two major powers?
But some ASEAN member nations, under the wrong leadership, act differently. The Philippines is one of them. So far, 2 Filipinos leaders have been fooled by the Americans to become fighting dogs against China. First there was Aquino III. His successor, Duterte, was smart enough not to be one. He knew the Americans too well. He openly asked an American official if Americans would die for the Philippines. The answer was vague and uncommitted. To this day, he does not trust the Americans to do any good for the Philippines.
Was more of a friend, a closer friend to China. It seems that China here in Asia is making everything that is possible to gather us as good neighbors. But America, as it becomes its foreign policy, if you look at it at a distance, it is really hostile. So, if you stick with America, if you identify yourself with America, then everything becomes blurry with our relations with China and the rest of the ASEAN countries. In terms of geopolitics, trade, we have a robust trade relations between China and the Philippines. After I visited China and talked to the president, humbly asking him to consider the plight of my nation, that we earn money, at least one of the ways to earn money was really our exports, because we are an agricultural country. So I was very appreciative of the brotherly gesture, almost like to cry. It was really very kind to us Filipinos. I hope that we can stop this raucous over there, because the Americans are the ones pushing the Philippine government to go out there and find a quarrel and eventually maybe start a war. But I do not think that America will die for us. And yet, America has so many bases in the Philippines now. I am sorry for my country. I am not the president anymore. I cannot run. And if God would allow it, and perchance, I would reverse the situation. I will remove their basis.
Duterte's successor, Current Filipino President Marcos Jr. is another leader fooled by the Americans to go against China. The Americans present themselves to him as the big brother who, under treaty, will not fail to defend Philippines against China.
The United States also remains ironclad in our commitment to the defense of the Philippines, including the South China Sea, and we're going to continue to support the Philippines' military modernization goals.
He falls for it. With US and China in a global rivalry, he believes it is a winning strategy to side with the US. He is ignorant of the great risk he is putting the Philippines through. Has he ever asked the Americans if they would die for the Philippines? The Filipinos think their country has a special relationship with the US simply because there's a Mutual Defense Agreement, MDA, between them. This has proven to be a one-sided relationship.
We will not beat the Chinese. We cannot beat the Chinese, and we know this, and yet we're using the Philippines to create the conditions of potential conflict with the Chinese. Please understand that for the Filipino people, this is a recipe for disaster. You think America is your friend. So too did the Ukrainian people, and they are dying by the hundreds of thousands. Friends don't let friends die in those quantities.
They are forgetful about their country's history with the US. First, Filipinos were used to fight against their Spanish colonial master with a promise of independence. After the Spanish were defeated, the Americans became the new overlord. When the Filipinos fought against the Americans for independence, they were massacred.
Spanish-American War, which made the Philippines a colony of America. Although the US had claimed that they were fighting for Cuba's independence rather than for land expansion, they saw the takeover of the Philippines as a chance to spread American power in Asia and opted to keep it as a colony. The United States then established a colonial administration in the Philippines, with William Howard Taft serving as the first governor before he became a president of the United States. The United States originally portrayed its colonization of the Philippines as a mission of benevolent assimilation, promising to modernize and civilize the country in a positive light. Benevolent assimilation was a term used by American politicians to justify their imperialism and control over the Philippines. The US claimed to have a duty to bring its superior political, economic, and cultural values to the Philippines, promising to modernize and improve their lives with education, infrastructure, and other amenities. However, this policy was often used to mask their true intentions of imperialism. The Filipinos eventually saw through this corrupt statement and felt betrayed by the broken promises of the Americans. They had initially welcomed the Americans and even fought alongside them for independence from Spain, but now turned against them. This led to yet another bloody struggle, with the Filipino army ill-equipped, undertrained, disorganized, and still in the process of establishing itself against a stronger, better trained, and technologically advanced imperial power. After briefly tasting independence, the Filipinos had to fight for it once again. The escalating conflict between the United States and the Philippines sparked a full-blown war from 1899 to 1902, which American leaders peculiarly called the Philippine Insurrection. Filipino fighters employed a range of tactics, including guerrilla warfare, ambushes, and hit-and-run attacks. Although generally poorly equipped and lacking the training and discipline than of the American army, they compensated for these deficiencies with their expertise in the local terrain. In contrast, the American military capitalized on superior technology, organization, and cutting-edge weapons and communication technologies, such as heavy artillery and the telegraph. Moreover, they established concentration camps and employed scorched earth tactics, such as the burning of villages and fields, which resulted in the displacement of millions of Filipinos and caused widespread suffering and starvation among the local population.
Then they lost the territory of Sabah which was taken away from them by the Brits to form Malaysia in 1963. The Philippines wanted to reclaim it by force. The US, by then the Philippines' ally with the MDA between them, stood still and mute over the whole matter. A big chunk of Philippines territory was being taken away and it did nothing. Smart Filipinos leaders are aware of all these and know what design the US has on the Philippines in current US-China rivalry. If Marcos Jr. really wants to become a patriotic hero of the Philippines, he should try to reclaim Sabah. He is very selective in defending Philippines' sovereign integrity. There is obvious difference between his approach to claim on SCS and Sabah. When it comes to the latter, he is nice and diplomatic. Better still if he would ask the Americans to help him fight for the return of Sabah to the Philippines. Would Marcos Jr. ask the US to reclaim Sabah for the Philippines? If he does, the US would tell him to get lost. Neither would the US, by its own initiative, help the Philippines to reclaim Sabah. Why? 1. Malaysia was a British design with American consent. 2. It would start a war between Malaysia and the Philippines. This would disrupt US strategy to unite ASEAN against China. That's what the Philippines claim on the SCS has become, an American strategy in Asia-Pacific geopolitics. That's how intriguing the geopolitics in the region has become due to its colonial past and 21st century US imperialism.